Okay, we're at the Little Rock, or the University of Arkansas at Little Rock. It's hard to say that. For the SSA Secular Student Alliance Conference. Again, interviewing Bob, who's a professor at Mississippi State, professor of...
I teach in the Department of Physics and Astronomy.
Okay, yeah, lightweight stuff, yeah.
My master's degree, I don't really belong there though, because my master, I don't have a PhD, but I do have a master's degree in meteorology.
Yeah.
So I was a weatherman in a former life.
Yeah.
TV weatherman. And
weatherman, yeah.
Yeah, and I did 5 years of TV, and I did 4 years. I worked for the USA Today. I did the weather page for the USA Today for 4 years.
Yeah.
But in my educational life, I've been a teacher. I've been a high school teacher, community college teacher, now a university teacher. I'm an instructor.
Yep.
And I teach the gen ed levels in the physics department.
Yep.
So I teach Physical Science Survey 1, Physical Science Survey 2, and Descriptive Astronomy. So these are all gen ed courses that my clientele are primarily non-science majors.
Yeah.
History major, business major.
Some of the most important classes, right?
Yeah.
Really, in the university.
And I also get a lot of pre-service teachers. So the LED curriculum requires those students to take Physical Science 1 or 2. And usually I'm the terminal science for most of these people. But I really do, I guess I cater to the LED teachers because I want those teachers who may not be that comfortable with science to come out of my class, and when they're a third grade teacher somewhere and a kid asks, why is the sky blue, or why is the tile floor colder than the wood floor, that they can explain the physical concepts in a convincing way and an understandable way to a third grader. So.
All right, so I have a question about that.
Okay.
That I know is probably not what this whole conversation is going to be about, but I'm just way too interested in it. Because Richard Feynman has this famous way of describing why fire comes out of a tree, out of wood.
Ooh, okay.
Are you familiar with this?
No, I'm not familiar. Okay. Right.
I think the gist of it is, and I'm just trying to capture the idea in as short a time as possible, that that basically the tree is trying to kick out oxygen, if I get that right. That it wants to drink in carbon and kick out oxygen. Carbon is good, and it wants to drink in carbon so it can grow and be a tree. And so it kicks out oxygen. I think that's right.
It wants to take in oxygen in the combustion process.
He's saying, no, I'm talking about for the tree to grow.
Oh, okay, all right.
For the tree to grow,
okay.
right?
So,
it has to kick out.
Take in carbon dioxide, kick out the oxygen.
That's right. It's kicking out oxygen.
Right.
Yeah. So that's what allows the tree to grow and become a tree. And then you cut it down, and then what happens is when you strike a match and throw it into the wood, is that the oxygen is trying to rush back in to the tree, and the carbon is getting kicked out, and I forgot the most important thing. In order for the tree, this is why I'm not a science teacher. In order for the tree to get the carbon, it's using sunlight. Mm-hmm. So it's soaking in the sunlight.
Right.
So once you strike the match later, as the oxygen tries to rush back into the tree, the sunlight tries to escape, and it escapes as fire. Okay?
You're liberating all this energy.
I always thought that was a pretty good, like if you're talking to a third grader, that's a pretty easy thing to remember.
Yeah.
And it's a nice little visual thing, and it's sort of the truth, if I understand it correctly, broadly,
Right.
So do you sometimes they're trying to come up with ways to explain stuff like that in the sort of Feynman way? Okay,
Absolutely,
Great.
yeah.
All right, so on to the main thing, which is you're here at the SSA Conference.
Right. So yes.
And what's your background?
Oh, okay. So,
Were you raised religious or irreligious or whatever?
Yes, I should. So I'll just kind of explain that. In addition to being an instructor, I'm also the faculty sponsor for our local SSA chapter. We're called FAMSU, Free Thinkers, Agnostics, and Atheists of Mississippi State University.
Okay.
But as far as my own...
Say that acronym again.
FAMSU. It's FAAMSU.
Okay.
Free Thinkers, Atheists, and Agnostics of Mississippi State.
FAMSU. That makes sense.
But
like a Dutch spelling. 2 A's.
My own personal, biography religiously is that I was raised in a Roman Catholic home in Pennsylvania, and I actually grew up in a very, very rural part of Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. The county I grew up in when I was young was the only county in the state. There's 67 counties in Pennsylvania, the only county in the state without a traffic light. So it was mostly dairy farms. We were about 30 miles away from the state capital of Harrisburg. Yeah. And so the work was either farm work in Perry County, or people drove to the capital to work in state offices, that sort of thing.
Okay.
but it was
So
very
common sense people.
very
right?
exactly. You know, it's like anywhere else. You know, 20 miles outside of any metro area,
Yeah.
and you're essentially in Alabama. You know, so
Yep.
there was I grew
True
up.
in New York City. People don't realize this about New
Right.
York City. You don't have to go that far before you're
Yeah,
in
I
rural
said
country.
ain't and crick, and I spoke
Yeah.
with a twang. Just by so.
I said correct.
And but it was a very Protestant area as well. So being a
What
Catholic,
kind of area?
very Protestant.
Protestant,
so
yeah.
Lutherans, Methodists, et cetera, et cetera. I think Pennsylvania generally is kind of mixed religiously.
Yeah.
But I was in a particularly Protestant rural part of Pennsylvania. So being a Catholic, I never felt like ridiculed or under real pressure. But I also recognized the fact that in my school, there were barely any kids that I knew that I would see on Sundays at church. I knew I was,
Right.
we were a minority kind of religious position.
Yeah.
But anyway, my parents, as far as I recall, my parents divorced when I was 8 or 9, and after the divorce, my mom took a much more devout religious bend. She became very, very devout.
Yeah,
and,
almost like a response, you mean?
yeah,
Probably.
I think so. And but I did the altar boy route. I was an altar boy from 3rd grade through graduating high school.
And your dad, you lived with your mom?
I lived with my mom. Yeah, my
And
dad.
your dad was religiously
He was
less Catholic then? At
No,
that
no.
point?
He was actually he was raised Jehovah's Witness. This is it's
Okay.
an oddly yoked pair,
Yep.
and a pair that was essentially you sort of knew the divorce was going. It was
Right,
definitely
yeah. They
in the
divorced when you were 8 or
cards.
9, yeah. You had siblings?
I've got an older brother.
Yeah.
So my dad, even when he was at home, by the time I was aware of anything, he was really not religious at all. He had left Jehovah's Witness
Okay.
in his adult life, and was essentially non-religious, but really said nothing.
Yeah.
My mom was responsible. We were baptized.
Yeah.
She did all the religious education, and then he was out of the picture.
Yeah.
So high school, altar boy, college. I went to University of Scranton, which is a Jesuit university.
Yeah, yeah.
And my priest my childhood priest, when he found out that I was going to Scranton, now he was an oblate of St. Francis de Sales. That was the order that staffed our mission church
Okay.
in rural Pennsylvania. He told my mom that I would either come out of Scranton as a priest or an atheist, was the way he referred to it. He's like, once the Jesuits get to him, he'll either be a priest or he'll be an atheist.
Wow, interesting statement.
And so I did the what's called the Special Jesuit Liberal Arts Program at Scranton, which is essentially they invite 50 of the upper level academically qualified students to. It's a pre-honors honors program sort of thing. So freshman year, I joined this SJLA program, and I'm taking at least one class each semester with the same cohort of students. So you got kind of the best professor. It was very competitive because you're with some of the top-notch kids coming from St. Joseph's Prep and all these different prep schools, and I'm this country mouse coming
Right.
into, and so it was good in the sense that you would take a lot of it's a liberal arts program. So I took the first class I took was Intro to Philosophy, and if you complete the SJLA program, you've earned enough credits to have a philosophy minor.
Yeah.
And then it's just a couple of extra courses if you want to get the major. So actually, at Scranton, I double majored in both physics as well as philosophy because I had
nice combination.
took part of this took this SJLA program. And all through college, I would say, inactive or active, depending upon the semester as far as my church going.
In other words, you were in college.
I was in college,
Yeah.
right? And but by my
But you weren't at that point having like deep existential doubts.
I probably was, but I was kind of.
Were you in high school too, or no?
No, in high school I would say,
Went along with the show.
went
It
on-
seemed like you believed it.
I exactly. I think it's really tough. I wish I had journaled more. Because I think that, I enjoyed being an altar boy. I like being an altar boy because I like being part of the show. I really didn't like sitting out in the audience.
Yeah.
So once I had the chance, and as an 8-year-old, to be up on stage.
Yeah.
I'm a closet extrovert in the sense
Okay.
that I'm a pretty private person, but I'm also a performer. I've always loved to sing. And I got into acting in high school, and now I'm a teacher. Teachers are performers.
Yep, yep.
And then I have this separate persona where I'm a singing weatherman, and I go
Yeah.
out and I play shows. So I love to perform, and so I think that being an altar boy gave me the chance to be part of the show as opposed to being part of the audience.
Yep.
And
That's probably true. Yeah.
but in college, I think I probably was having some some questions, and I would take like a class from one of the priests. I remember Father Kosha had a Faith and Reason class that I took, and I was introduced to Thomas Merton. I started to become a big Thomas Merton fan. Like my junior year, senior year in college, I was listening, reading Seven Storey Mountain. This priest gave me all the recorded lectures of Thomas Merton from his Gethsemane days, and so I was listening to all that.
His what days?
He was at Gethsemane,
Gethsemane days.
The monastery that he wound up at. So I was listening to all this content, and so you graduated college,
and that was sort of like enough to assuage the doubts.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
Just for interjection,
Yep.
just so you understand, because you don't know me really.
Good.
I had almost the same experience growing up. Parents divorced when I was 6. Dad's side was Catholic. Mother's side was pretty much irreligious. I lived with my mother, unlike you.
Right.
It was the irreligious side, so for me, I was atheistic. Didn't
Gotcha.
believe in God from probably 5th or 6th grade on.
Right,
and then
right.
converted to Christianity later.
Interesting. Yeah.
So just telling you because of the,
Yeah,
I feel some similarities, so I thought I'd
This is
share
like the
with you.
bizarro world.
Yeah. It's Twilight Zone. Anyway, so go ahead. I'm real curious now, but because now you're in your mid-20s.
So I'm in my mid-20s, and I'm actually out in the working world. I took a teaching job in Maryland. I taught high school science in Maryland for 2 years.
Yeah.
And
Public school or
public school,
okay.
public school. And I went, I lived in Elkton, Maryland. I taught in Chesapeake City, Maryland. And when I got to Elkton, I joined the local church,
Yeah.
and I think I started to realize that I was not really that confident in much of the church doctrine. I certainly was strongly questioning any of the supernatural stuff. That's why like the Merton mysticism prayer stuff was attractive to. I was trying to figure out, why am I believing this? But I was also strongly motivated by the social aspect. I joined the church to meet girls and to play my guitar. I was just starting to play guitar at this point, and it gave me a chance to join the praise band and have a reason to practice and play. And again, it got me up on stage.
Yeah.
So I did that for a couple of years, left teaching, went back to graduate school to study meteorology. So I went to Penn State, joined the campus ministry there.
You're not a insufferable Penn State football fan,
I'm not an
are you?
insufferable Penn State football fan.
You're a sufferable Penn State football fan.
I will root for them when they're on television, but I'm not passionate.
No, it's a loyal group. I'm just joking.
But there I also joined the campus ministry again, largely for the social aspect, as well as I think, my mom was pretty devout, and we would go on the pro-life. We would take the bus to Washington. Go outside the abortion clinics. I was.
You were all in.
I had adopted or I'd been indoctrinated into the politics that went along with the religious positions.
Right. Yeah.
And
do you think for your mom it was a political thing, or was that more of a cultural value religious thing? Or were they not?
I think they're so intertwined. I think they're so intertwined. It's kind of tough to maybe.
It's probably true, but some people will be like very active in politics as such, getting people elected and stuff. And others are more into the cultural fight,
I think it's the culture war thing. I would say.
Not that there's not still passion about the politics, but they not really play a direct role beyond voting.
Right.
Anyway, go ahead.
And so at State College, I kind of was doing sort of the same trajectory, and then I got my first full-time television job. Was actually in Fort Smith, Arkansas. So I get the job, and I at that point in my life, I think I was having enough questions and just not being that satisfied, even with the social aspect of it. I was in there to meet girls. I wasn't meeting that many girls, and the music. I was playing music kind of on my own at this point. And
you may still be a Christian if only you had met a girl.
Exactly. Well, that's a
for some people,
very
maybe
strong possibility. And so when I went to Arkansas, I kind of deliberately said to myself, I'm moving 1,500 miles away from everything that I've known.
Yeah.
I'm also putting a pretty good distance between my mom and myself.
Right.
And so I thought, I'm going to try an experiment. I'm not going to go to a church. I'm going to move there.
Okay.
And not go to a church.
So you had enough internal angst that you were like, I'm going to actually start trying to try out the outfit.
Yes. Yeah. And what was so interesting was, of course,
so in some ways you had already had, at that point, did you think I still believe in God, but I'm not sure I'm Catholic?
And I guess I should say, I should also mention, that I was pretty far in the sense that, like, my college roommate, my junior and senior year, sort of surprised me. Our senior year, I'm getting ready to, I'm applying to graduate schools and all this kind of stuff, and
Yeah.
he was actually on the physics education route. We were both physics majors, and he was he was student teaching at a high school at the time. All of a sudden, he asked me for a kind of a character letter. He's applying to become a priest in the Diocese of New York, and he needs me to, so I write him a nice letter. It kind of surprised me. I didn't think, he was more conservative, a little more withdrawn than I was. He wasn't into the party scene the way I was and that sort of thing. But I didn't necessarily think, he was the oldest of six boys in his family. I didn't necessarily think that he was going to wind up in the priesthood. But that's where he wound up.
Yeah. Although in the devout Catholic world, having one child be a priest there's an expectation or a big value placed on that.
Let's just say. And that's why I think my mom, and so not only is my roommate now heading for the priesthood, but I'm flirting with it even after college. I've talked to a couple of vocation directors. I went to Gethsemane for a retreat. I visited a monastery in Massachusetts. So I'm kind of still kind of keeping that
so
door
in those
open.
So once you start, I guess once you're out of that and teaching, you're having more existential doubts at that point, right?
Yeah. But also I kind of raised the expectation game of my mother. My mother, who was told he's either going to be a priest or he's going to be an atheist. She's seeing priest here. Like, she was disappointed that I was becoming a teacher, because she didn't think that was a very noble profession. She thought I could do more than just be a science teacher in Maryland, so especially if there was the potential I could be a priest. So now all of a sudden I'm going to be a weatherman. This is even more disappointing to her. But so I moved to Arkansas. Don't go to church. But of course, once I get my boots on the ground, I show up at the first day at work, and it was my first exposure to life in the at least Mid-South, where the first question is, "What's your name?" The second question is, "Have you found a church home yet?" The woman who was going to be my co-anchor, she was the first person to greet me. That was her second question. So, "What's your name? Have you found a church home yet?" And I'm already, in my head, I'm trying to get away from that. And so I don't even know what I told her, but I didn't wind up going to any churches there. And yet I still found a social circle. One of the camera operators, he and I started playing tennis and playing guitar together. There's a group of people that I would play golf with. It was a first job kind of market for most of us. It was a small market television. So most people were fresh out of college, all single. So on Friday night, after the late newscast, there was one bar that all the different, the different TV stations would, and the newspaper people, it was the media bar. We would all meet, and people started coupling up and that sort of thing. And that's eventually what happened with me, is that my now wife was a producer at the CBS station in town. I was at the ABC, she was at the CBS, but we met at a party. There was a media party, and that's kind of where that went. So my wife is from Tupelo, Mississippi, was raised Southern Baptist. And so this became a big problem. Once I told my mother that I was engaged to be married, my mom had always told my brother and I that if we married outside the church, she would disown us.
I knew that well.
And she was
I knew of that.
Yeah, because she's the oldest of 6 children, and she has 3 sisters and 2 brothers. And her 3 sisters all married in the church. Their marriages were all long-term and I guess successful, whereas my mom married this Jehovah's Witness, married outside the church, in a justice of the peace sort of a ceremony, and of course her marriage failed. And so she always told my brother and I, sure enough, she was good to her word. Once I got engaged, that was pretty much the last of my communication with my mother.
No.
Yeah.
Wow.
So.
I mean, I know. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Woof.
So
that's brutal. Seriously, that's really brutal.
So
tough.
At that point, I would have labeled myself. I'm probably about 30 years old at this point. I would have labeled myself as an apatheist, in the sense that, and that's how my wife came to know me. She was this. She was a raised Southern Baptist, but not that. It wasn't a big deal in her household, and she, being politically progressive, was definitely not. She was out of the Southern Baptist. But she was still. I would say she would label herself a Christian. And in the first few years of our marriage, we bounced around a bit. We went to the TV station. We went to, like I said, I worked in the newspaper business, and She would usually like find a church, that she would join, just to have somewhere to go on a Sunday. Because quite often I was not I was working on a Sunday. I was a weekend weatherman, or when I worked for the newspaper, we printed Monday through Friday, but we were putting the paper together Sunday through Thursday. And so I always was working on Sundays, and that was good in the sense that it also gave us cover. My mother was now out of the picture. I wasn't worrying about saving face for my side of the family, but for her side of the family, we were pretty far away, which was good. They didn't know what we were doing on Sundays.
Yeah.
But also I had this excuse, Bob's not, Bob's working. That's fine. And it wasn't until we started having children and we decided to move back to her home. So this was 2009 or so. We moved to Tupelo. Now all of a sudden, we're in their backyard. We're in my in-laws' backyard, and all my wife's extended family all live in northern Mississippi. And my wife, of course, at this point, has there's two kids, a toddler and a brand new baby. And so she's a stay-at-home mom, moving back to her hometown, but she's been away for a decade. And so she wants to join a church to save face for the family. Because while we were away, she was going, but it wasn't a big deal. But also to have a social network. And I realized that was really important. She had to kind of, and so we started going to a Methodist church. In fact, we joined. I think we were members, I believe. And I started playing banjo in the praise band again. I would kid her.
So it was a little bit more on the progressive side as far as Christianity than that Methodist church?
That particular minister at the time, I'd say in fact, he eventually got fired because of his progressiveness.
Okay, I figured if she was attracted to it based on what you said earlier, probably that meant it was a little bit more, I'd say liberal, and it was the old way of saying it, but now they say progressive, whatever.
Right, and so I would kid her. I said, I'm probably the only atheist banjo player in a Methodist praise band in the state of Mississippi.
Yeah.
But we did that for a number of years while the kids were small, and it wasn't until when my eldest son was about 7 years old, I was having real cognitive dissonance. I was really up there playing, thinking, he's out there, what is he making of all this? I'm singing songs that I don't believe, and I'm hearing sermons that I don't necessarily agree with. And I very inelegantly stopped going, and I didn't give my wife very much warning about this. This is something I didn't do very well.
Probably some advice you would give to young married guys: don't do the land.
Have a conversation. Talk about this a lot more than I did. And at this point, I think it was also professionally, because like I said, I'd been an apatheist for a long time. But at this point in my professional career, I was at the community college, and I'm teaching astronomy, which I hadn't done this before. I hadn't taught astronomy. I'd always taught physics before, and in fact, as a high school physics teacher, I always felt bad for my colleagues. I felt bad for the English teacher because they had to come up with a reading list. And they were inevitably going to piss somebody off with what books they select. The poor history teacher, oh goodness, whose history are you going to teach? The biology teacher, forget about it. I don't want to be in his shoes, or he or she. They've got to decide how much evolution can I get by in teaching. Whereas as a physics teacher, I'm pretty safe. Like it or not, there's a lot of white European males. I'm going to teach Newton's laws. But there's not a whole lot that's controversial. But now all of a sudden, I'm at the community college and I'm teaching astronomy, and I have a student come up to me, a good student. I'd just been talking about Big Bang cosmology. She comes up to me after class and said, "I think I'm going to have to drop the class because what you're teaching me conflicts with my fundamentalist upbringing." And this was like I'd never had to face this, and I thought, oh my goodness, I've been this apatheist. Let people believe what they want to believe. Now all of a sudden I'm realizing, oh, this is a young person,
consequential,
who these beliefs are impacting her act. She's making a decision about her academic trajectory, that could impact her future career goals.
For sure.
And so in the moment, I mollified her. I said, you're a good student. She was an A student. I had her sister for 2 other classes, and they were both good kids and good students. And I was like, if you have to, just learn it and dump it at the end of the semester. And I felt so dirty in the moment, and I felt this is a horrible. This was a teachable moment that I completely missed because I taught her that it's okay when you come up against something that doesn't agree with something you were raised to believe with. It's okay to discard it. And I felt horrible about it. And that kind of led me, into, it just so happened
Okay,
that.
you mind if I interject? Because I have
Yep.
two questions I just don't want to forget. One is
Okay.
from before, and then one is just about
Yes,
the
please.
girl. The first one I'll come back to,
Okay.
which is the her. No, let's just do her, and then I'll go back to the other one. The other one's about sort of like what you were thinking about the Bible at that time, prior to all that. Like, but I'll come back to that. It'll probably just come out of this. In fact, this first question. Did you ever think, hey, like there's obviously Christians who accept the Big Bang cosmology that are at elite universities, even traditional Christians, could I, like, why don't I just tell her, there are like serious Christians, evangelical Christians, that are in top elite universities who accept the Big Bang cosmology and don't think this is in conflict with the way to interpret Genesis.
Right,
So
right.
maybe you could explore those things or something. Like, did you think of trying to do that with her?
In the moment, no.
Oh,
and,
okay,
and,
all right.
that's, I think, why I started to, because I felt so disappointed in myself for not doing better in that moment. I started to then think, gosh, how could I have better handled that situation?
Yeah, sure.
And then actually, so that kind of led me into street epistemology. I just so happened that what hit my radar screen were these videos about people having conversations about contentious issues, and how can you,
Okay.
what kind of a conversation could I have created there
Got it.
to drill down to.
Yeah.
Not
Help
only
Help
providing her with
Yeah.
hey, some other options, some other hey, that there are plenty of Christians that do accept it, but also let's talk about, just because you were raised to believe something to be true, or is it this way?
Yeah.
How would we actually figure out whether it really is true? What you've been taught to be true.
Did you, when you got exposed to that, did you think to yourself, and maybe I don't know what your philosophy stuff was, but didn't I shouldn't say didn't because it sounds loaded. Did you think, hey, this is what Socrates did?
Yeah.
This is basically what this is what I
Yes.
was doing in philosophy classes.
Yes. Yeah.
And like I kind of knew this already. Did that ever cross your mind?
But
once you
also,
saw
of course, maybe as a quite often what we learn in college, it all too often seems so theoretical. Like
That's
and
true.
I've chided
So true,
I've
yeah.
chided the priest who taught my introductory intro to philosophy, because we're still Facebook friends.
Yeah.
And I'm like, gosh, why wasn't more like, well, now that I've found street epistemology,
Yeah.
and I took a class called epistemology in college, but yet it was so academic.
It was all top down.
It was all history, and we were reading Plato's Theaetetus and all this kind of
Yeah.
stuff. But
But you're not
why
actually
wasn't I
doing
seeing
a
this?
class.
Yeah,
like you're a group in a Socratic seminar.
right. So,
Which is very different.
yes.
Yeah, that's very different. I agree. Okay, that explains it.
Yeah. So then it just seemed to.
So you were pretty ready then to be able to do that.
Yeah,
just given
the
your
street
background.
epistemology
Yeah.
certainly resonated with me, because I was
Yeah.
thinking, how can I?
You had some philosophical chops to kind of make sense of this.
And I think I started to realize, I need to, instead of being an apatheist, I need to actually get a little more active. Not only for my students, for my own children.
Yeah.
How can I get them to really think about how they arrive at beliefs and teach critical thinking skills quite explicitly?
Yeah.
How can I do that in my classroom?
Because anybody who teaches, if you teach a subject, I teach Greek and Latin, ancient history, you teach science, at some point you realize, there's basic tools for learning any subject that if those tools aren't very sharp,
Right.
it affects your learning of every subject, like
Right.
logic, epistemology.
Right.
So you end up thinking this applies to everything. It would help you critically analyze religion, politics, culture, your family situation, like anything.
Right.
Is that about? Am I catching what you were saying?
Absolutely. And in my mind,
Okay.
because I'm teaching mostly gen ed students who are non-science majors, I tried to avoid. I started to actually avoid bringing up the term scientific method, because that's in the introduction or chapter 1 of almost all the science books. Scientific method. But for most of these students who are not heading for science careers and have had probably bad experiences with science courses, they zone out, because they think, you've got to be wearing goggles or a lab coat to be using the scientific method.
Right.
And so I stopped using that term. I just started talking about critical thinking.
Yeah.
Because that's all it is.
because
Scientific method is critical thinking.
Historians are studying history scientifically, is the way they'll talk about it or think about it.
Right. You're going to be offered a car loan, and you better be a good critical thinker to be able to assess whether that's a good car loan or not. So these students who are not going to be scientists but are going to be citizens and voters, and parents, I want them to get critical thinking skills. And if I use scientific method, they're going to zone out. Whereas if I talk about critical thinking, and especially what I started doing was I was actually finding examples where I was a lousy critical thinker, like examples from my own teaching career where I was wrong.
Yeah, of course.
And I would develop lectures.
All the time,
I would develop lectures about this. My favorite example is from a demonstration that I did about, I don't know if you've ever seen this, where you take a glass of water and you put like an index card on the top and you turn it upside down and it stays.
Yep.
Well, I did this demo one time. I was teaching it at Awamba Community College. Do this demonstration. Do you know what the explanation is, by the way?
No.
Yeah. The explanation that I gave at the time was atmospheric pressure. The fact that we're at the bottom of this ocean of air that exerts 14.7 pounds of 14.7 pounds of force per square inch. Yeah. And that if you look at that card sitting there,
greater than what the water is.
The weight of the water, right? So I do this demonstration, give this explanation.
Yeah, which sounds really good, by the way. Sounds very scientific.
Yes. And I'm just about done. And all of a sudden, this hand goes up in the back of the room. And this is a moment that I will forever, I've coined the Freppen objection. Yeah. Because there's a guy named Aaron Freppen in the back of the class.
Nice.
And he's like, what if there was no water in that glass?
Would the card still stay up?
Stay up. And it doesn't.
Of course not, yeah.
And it was a beautiful moment.
By the way, every teacher has had a moment like this.
Yeah.
And what you do after that determines a lot about the kind of teacher you'll be after that.
Exactly, yeah. Anyway. So you know what I did?
Yeah. What'd you do?
I said, I don't know.
Oh, brilliant.
I said, I don't know. I'm flat-footed in front of 30 students.
Yeah.
Most of them weren't paying attention. Aaron certainly was.
Yeah.
And I make the point. I was like, and he wasn't a jerk about it. He wasn't trying to show me up.
He was trying to figure it out.
It was a sincere, genuine question. But even if he had been a jerk about it, it was still a beautiful moment in the sense that he was falsifying my explanation. And it gave me a good way of talking about falsification.
Yeah.
The fact that
the water would stay up also if the card wasn't there. But
right.
Yeah.
And so it led me into this journey. So by saying I don't know was not good enough, because now all of a sudden I start doing some research, because I wanted to have a better answer than I don't know. Yeah. And so I developed a whole follow-up lecture, about, and I go through the process.
Can you explain it in like 10 seconds? Because I really am interested now.
Yeah. So the next demonstration so as I'm looking into it, I see a demonstration where you take tulle, like the wedding veil fabric, you put it over the top of a glass, turn it upside down, and it'll stay as well. Oh, surface tension.
I was just going to say it must be something to do with the way the water connects.
The water molecules like each other. They're polar molecules. So they hold on to each other, and so it
just goes.
They hold on to the mesh.
Yeah.
And it's enough together force to hold up the weight of the water.
And it goes up onto the glass as well, I guess.
That's the meniscus. If you turn the other way, you get the meniscus in a graduated cylinder or something like that. But in this case, it's essentially it does. It kind of pulls the mesh up a little bit. You can see a little indentation. Yeah. So now all of a sudden, surface tension is my explanation.
Yeah.
But I'm oversteering. But actually, I didn't oversteer.
Yeah.
I thought, how can I falsify that? If I really think that it's surface tension now, what can I do? Well, what if I take a glass and I do the same thing, except for I've put a little hole in the bottom of the glass, so that when I've got it inverted, I can now open it up and let a few air molecules. If it's holding up a glass of water, what's a few air molecules? And all of a sudden it starts pouring out. Yeah. So now it's not all surface tension. Yeah. And it's not all atmospheric. In my mind, it's actually a combination of the two. Yeah. Okay. And so I understood the physics so much better, and I could explain it so much better, and it wouldn't have happened if Aaron Freppen had not raised his hand. And my goal now in life is to be an Aaron Freppen in as many situations as possible.
By the way, because you did philosophy, right? Like this is exactly what birthed philosophy in the classical world.
Right.
It's the very spirit of philosophy.
Yes.
Is that. And also, by the way, cross-subject. The first philosophers did physics.
Right.
They did biology.
Yes.
They did, the notion we have nowadays is that a scientist has nothing to do with philosophy. In fact, a lot of scientists think that philosophy is just kind of, it's unimportant, it's irrelevant,
Right.
Like their instinct is to think it's not helpful. Anyway, so let me go back now to the question I didn't get to, which was somewhere in there, you must have been like actually thinking in terms of not just God, but in terms of, the Bible, Jesus, the account of his life, his teachings, the story of how we get forgiveness, all this kind of stuff. There must have somewhere been in there like a wrestling with that too, right? Not just, I assume?
Yeah, I think I had a lot of that kind of got discarded like back in like my mid-20s, I think. Like,
Okay.
I didn't.
So you were
the whole supernatural stuff. Yeah, that went away pretty quick. I stayed in like I said in
like
Catholicism.
even in college, you mean, or like if I'm just trying to get
In college, I
because
think
usually at some point there's this sort of and by the way, I say usually, often it's just Niagara Falls. People once they start casting one thing, it's just the whole thing just all crumbles and they just
Right.
dispense with it. Others are like the reverse of C.S. Lewis, where they chuck Christianity or Mormonism, but not theism.
A belief in a higher
And
power.
they go
or
more like a
something of the sort.
cataract and eventually, give up later the higher power thing or whatever.
Right.
So yours sounds like more Niagara Falls. Is that the way you're saying?
I think so. Like I think like the supernatural stuff. I think it was pretty easy.
You
to
just
discard.
sort of
I
like,
didn't have a
there
good reason
weren't
to believe it.
resurrections in there.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And
yeah.
so,
what
like
kept me-
Jeffersonian, like
what
Thomas
kind of
Jefferson.
kept me in it was the politics that I had kind of identified with at that point.
Politics, morality, maybe.
And then morality, chasing girls and playing music.
But were you like, you weren't like reading Jesus, like you weren't reading the Bible and going, oh, I just disagree with all this moral stuff.
No,
at that time.
No, but being a Catholic, I wasn't reading the Bible a whole heck of a lot anyway.
Right.
Which is always the knock on
Or
Catholics.
what you were hearing.
But I was still reading. Actually, I was still reading Thomas Merton. In fact, at that point, and this was probably a significant tipping point for me, was that I was reading Thomas Merton's journals. So I had read pretty much everything of his up till then, but it was just about. His journals were under lock and key for 25 years after his death. He died in '68, and this is like mid '90s.
Yeah.
His journals are starting to be published and put out.
Yeah.
And I'm reading those. I'm getting them from the Delaware Public Library, and I'm reading them, and they're making less and less sense to me. Like in my mind, this guy that I thought was really, really smart and really had something, he just seemed like a confused, psychologically troubled person.
Yeah.
And I realized he wasn't really in touch with anything.
Yeah.
He was just kind of rambling.
He's public, right? Yeah. Versus
Yeah, and so that really I thought.
What do they? What's the old saying that a hero is not a hero to his valet?
Someone who really knows him.
Yeah.
Sees
and then the next line is not that he's not a hero, or not because he's not a hero, but because the valet is a valet. That's the rest of it, which is interesting, by the way. But at many levels, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So did you? So I see there was no really like wrestling. So did you then, once you were like, okay, I want to do something and help with critical thinking and this kind of stuff, and I'm going to get out there. Somewhere along the line, right, you're going to end up being confronted with like these biblical texts that everybody's like, oh yeah,
Yes,
I agree.
right.
So what was your approach to that? Go read Bart Ehrman or go YouTube videos, or you start reading the Bible again, or how were you then dealing with that?
Well, I'm listening. I'm learning a whole lot about the Bible by virtue of my podcast and YouTube diet. At this point.
And who are the influencers in that realm?
Seth Andrews, Thinking Atheist.
Seth Andrews.
Listen, watching
Thinking Atheist. That's
Thinking
his,
Atheist.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. Watching a lot of. I went through my angry atheist period, I suppose.
Yeah.
Watching a lot of Hitchens debates.
Oh yeah.
Christopher Hitchens debates, but I eventually kind of settled in with Thinking Atheist. A lot of the atheist community of Austin, all their podcasts, Atheist Experience, Talk Heathen, Truth Wanted. I listen to those.
So those are your main.
Right.
So I'm kind of just curious about this. Like when you're hearing them, obviously describe the Bible. Many of them ex-Christians, evangelical, ex-evangelicals, who actually did read the Bible a lot.
Right.
Were you thinking, I'm going to be as skeptical and critical of what they're saying, and I'm going to go to the primary source myself? Or were you largely just sort of accepting their kind of analysis?
Probably accepting a lot of their analysis, I would say.
Okay.
I didn't want to. I didn't necessarily. So that's always you got to read the Bible yourself. I'm a busy guy at this point. I've got 3 kids, and
I'm always just curious of like I mean, this is just human nature. It's nothing.
Right.
But we're often when we go down a skeptical path, and I relate very well to that.
Right.
so does Drew, my podcast partner. I think he describes himself as a skeptic.
Yes.
And I'm like, yeah, we're both pretty skeptical guys in general, right? And but we agree that like we're sometimes selectively skeptical.
Yeah, right.
It's hard to be like truly skeptical toward everything because it's hard to live in the what the Greek philosopher Arcesilaus said, which is nothing is certain, not even that.
Right.
It's very hard to live like that.
I like to think that I'm pretty, based on the videos that I put out. And I've produced only a small number of videos, but I have this critical thinking lecture series, and they're usually examples of things that I've done in my class. The Freppen objection, where most physics teachers are going to tell you that's atmospheric pressure.
Yep.
In fact, after I started to learn the physics more about it, I started to then, perhaps even more important was the fact, I started to, again, based on street epistemology, I started to think to myself, why was I at 100% confidence?
Yeah.
I was so confident that I was teaching students that it was atmospheric pressure. What got me there?
Yeah.
And I had to deconstruct that.
Yeah.
And I realized, gosh, I saw that index card trick when I was 7 years old as a Cub Scout. And I think the Cub Scout manual may have said something about,
yes.
I have to go back in time.
Yeah.
But I think it was introduced to me at an early age.
Yeah.
I go to high school, take a physics class, see that demonstration. Explanation, atmospheric pressure. Go to college, see that demonstration. Explanation, atmospheric pressure. I'm out in the teaching world. I'm teaching out of Paul Hewitt's textbook, Conceptual Physics. Paul Hewitt is a legend in physics instruction. I see a video of his on YouTube. Card stays up, atmospheric pressure. Paul Hewitt sold a ton of textbooks. He should have his physics right.
Yeah.
And so this confirmation, something that was introduced at an early age that now is being confirmed by authority figures and makes a hell of a lot of sense to me. I'm a meteorologist. I understand about atmospheric pressure. I know what it can do. It knocks trees down and all. It certainly could hold up an index card. So it made physical sense to me. So all these things, and I had never thought to ask, what happens when you got an empty glass or a glass full of air?
And it's very hard to do that, right?
Right.
Like it's hard to do the analysis to even see the card sitting there that Freppen saw.
Yes.
Right? Like this is really a mystery to me, how we even get to ask that right critical question, no matter how critical
and we have to be grateful for those people that do it for us, because otherwise I would have lived the rest of my life doing the same explanation.
Let me give you the parallel for me in history. Is I'll tell students, that at one point, right, we all know that people thought the world was flat, and they were, probably because of the Bible or whatever, and then Columbus, of course, thought he was going to sail off the end of the earth. You hear that a lot, and then we eventually the scientific revolution. We learned the truth, and we don't believe this anymore. So I'll tell them this, and I'll say, all of you have heard this, but it's not true. It's not historically true. The Romans and the Greeks knew the world was round. Mm-hmm. They knew the planetary bodies were round.
Eratosthenes.
They knew it was round.
Right.
Okay? If you go and see a sculpture of the emperor with his foot on the earth, it's not a hockey puck. Mm-hmm. It's a globe. Like they knew it was round. And it's a modern myth. Mm-hmm. And the irony of it is we are condescending toward them as if, well, back then they were idiots, they were influenced by the Bible and all this kind of stuff. But really, we're the ones who we don't know what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. We just don't know the history.
Right.
Why wouldn't we know the history? Because how many people are like applying the critical thinking skill, even if they take a trip to Ephesus and see Hadrian's sculpture, they don't look at the globe and think, hey, wait a second, how did they know it was a globe? Like they just don't apply it in that moment. Right. Not because they're idiots. It's just the kind of things you were saying. Like, what brings you to a point where you don't notice that? Right. And you perpetuate the flat earth stupidity of the modern people.
Yes, yeah.
Because in one sense, it's totally understandable. Mm-hmm. But it is, like, there's a lot of factors that go into why we look at it that way. And some of it doesn't speak well of us. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's a lack of humility, maybe, some of it. Like we know when we like to share that we know, and we don't think beyond that step. And there's other things enough to confirm it that make us think we've got it right.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So it needs to go on now. No.
But actually, you hit upon like one of my themes is certainty. In fact, on my guitar, I go around and I play these little programs, and on my guitar, I've put a couple of decals and The decal reads, "This machine surrounds certainty and forces it to think again." and this is an homage to my folk music heroes, Woody Guthrie and Pete Seeger, because Woody Guthrie had "This Machine Kills Fascists" on his guitar, and Pete Seeger had "This machine surrounds hate and forces it to surrender." And so mine is this machine surrounds certainty and forces it to think again.
Yeah.
Because all too often we find ourselves at this 100%, this is I call it a pandemic of certainty.
A pandemic of certainty. You know, Dylan visited Guthrie when he was going crazy there toward the end.
Yes.
Very interesting story about
Huntington's, whatever.
Yeah. Tough.
But I feel, and this is a message that I tell my students, is that all too often, certainty is seductive. It's psychologically seductive. It feels so good to feel certain about something. And you really have to examine, how did I get to that level of 100% certainty? And I try to, I try to show them, hey, there's moments in my own teaching career when I've been 100% certain, and I apply my skepticism. So I have examples. Mirages. What causes mirages? I'm not convinced that what you're taught in most physics books is actually correct. And I go through all this. And so I like to think that my skepticism I apply it to my own discipline as well as to religion.
What do you think about let me ask you this, is the word, and these are just like hunch things, they're linguistic things, so there's no right answer, I don't think. But I tend to think I like the word truth better. Like, I like the word truth because it somehow feels like it's not claiming certainty in quite the same way, even though I know truth in one sense there's truth and falsehood, so in one sense it's supposed to be certainty.
Right.
But I feel like it's a slightly different thing, and I don't know why. I was just asking your reaction to that, that's all.
Okay.
Because we obviously, like, our minds are truth seekers. Like what do they call the metal detectors, Our minds are truth detectors. Like, that seems like that's what they're looking for. People are, like, intuitively, they don't believe lies, meaning if they see something they know to be false or they perceive to be false, they don't then believe it.
Right.
Yeah, if you believe something, it's because you judge it to be true.
The distinguishing part is the
people are generally looking for the truth of something.
Right.
Like, all the factors that go into that are legion, but I'm just saying that is, the experience is not like, oh yeah, I know this is a lie and therefore I follow it,
Right. Well, that's the thing, even from my own teaching. I wasn't teaching what I knew to be wrong.
Yeah.
I was teaching what I thought to be right at the time.
You thought it to be the truth. You thought it to be certain in a way. The certainty about the truth is a little different from the truth. That's why I was saying I kind of like this word truth. I like the word assurance, maybe. The beginning of Luke's gospel, it's always struck me that he says he wrote the gospel so that the guy that he's writing to, he says, Theophilus, I wrote this so that you might know the assurance. Asphalia in Greek is like asphalt. The assurance of these things. And I've always thought that's a little, you could translate the word certainty, but it's not really the equivalent of our idea of certainty. It's a little bit different. And I've thought I like that, that it's not, obviously our minds are flawed. Like, what exactly is certainty when you have flawed minds already? Like, they're demonstrably flawed many, many times over. So it's like, what would even certainty be? But so what do you call it when you know it? When you think it's the truth? What's the word for it that you think is the better word if it's not certainty?
Well, certainty is kind of a position, I guess, that you've got an accurate map of reality.
Yeah.
I think it would be.
So you think you can have some certainty if your map is accurate? Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But certainty should be, kind of, like I said, it's kind of a
scale.
sliding scale.
Yeah.
Right.
Because I was going to say, I guess it's just the idea of probability, But probability is a little, like, certainty for the average person. They probably don't use the word certain with that sliding scale idea. Certainty usually has a stronger, like, very definite, precise thing. Whereas if you call it a sliding scale, I don't know if they'd use the word certainty. But this is definitely not, we don't need to talk about this because this is more just I'm interested in your thoughts on it. This is like getting far afield from your biography. So when you've gone back then, I guess you've read the Bible, like now you've you've more recently read the Gospels as you've kind of gone into critical some of the stuff since then, or no?
I've not really cracked.
Oh, okay.
I
was just curious what your reaction is if you were reading it like in the last couple of years.
No, because actually what kind of got me here to Little Rock, because this SSA conference was just kind of, it was chatter amongst my small club early this semester.
Yep.
We had a pretty big event happened middle of spring semester here.
Yeah.
Where, and I don't know if I told you this story, but now I will.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever heard of the Connectleys. Did you ever hear of Cliff and Stuart Connectley?
No.
Okay, they are evangelists out of Connecticut. It's a father
Okay.
and son. And they came to our campus. Now, I didn't know them from Adam, but there's a student who comes to our secular meetings who is a believer. But we quite often, sometimes we've had meetings where there's been more believers than non-believers. We're open to absolutely everybody.
Okay.
And we love anybody who wants to talk religion.
I need to come there.
Yeah.
Drew and I need to come there.
Yes, absolutely.
Let's make sure we get, I'll get your email and stuff after.
Right. And so this student has kind of foot in both camps, and that's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
But he says, hey, there's this father-son that our ministry, because he's part of Chi Alpha, which is the Assembly of God student ministry on our campus.
Yeah.
Our ministry is hosting these guys. They're coming from Connecticut. They're going to spend a whole week here in Mississippi, at Mississippi State. They're going to be on the drill field most days, just kind of, open air evangelizing.
Yeah.
But they said, would you mind if they come to the FAMSU meeting? Because we always have our FAMSU meetings are on Wednesday evenings.
Right.
And I was like, yeah, sure. We're open to absolutely everybody. We'll have a conversation.
Yeah.
I'm expecting an additional 12 or 20 people. And as that week materializes, as the time rolls around, I think it was supposed to be Wednesday evening was our meeting. I was contacted, I think maybe Monday, by our student president of our club saying, hey, they want to have like a discussion, like a 2-on-2 discussion.
Yeah.
Instead of just an open conversation, could it be like 2 believers, 2 non-believers discussion? Okay. And this dude was like, would you join me? So I was like, yeah, sure. I'm not going to let my student president, be hung out to dry. Sure, I'll do it. Then Tuesday night rolls around, and I get an email from my president saying, oh, they've drafted four prompts, 4 discussion prompts. I'm given 4 questions. That this is what we're going to be talking. So it's not too wide-ranging. Let's have it focused into 4 prompts.
Okay.
Yeah, I was like, the wording of these is kind of sketchy. In certain cases, who wrote these?
Right. Yeah. This is definitely not something you should agree to. Let me just say.
And so, okay.
To do.
Let's go with it. So then the evening arrives, and I'm seeing this chatter that, oh, this is a bigger event. We need to change locations. It turned out, instead of being this, what I was expecting, 20, 30 people in our regular meeting classroom.
Yeah.
There's hundreds of students showing up. And the president's office has to get involved to open up a lecture hall in the Old Main Academic Building to accommodate 700 students turn out, because these evangelists have been out on, they've been drawing good crowds.
Yeah, they're drawing,
I passed by on one afternoon to see, they got a bunch of people, and they're passing out flyers. They're advertising a debate. They're saying, hey, come out Wednesday night. So now all of a sudden, I'm one of 4 panelists. It's me, my student president. Yeah. And so I've got these 4 talking points. Yeah. And now I'm also told when I arrive that the way it's going to happen is you'll be given 5 minutes. So this is essentially a debate. You're given 5 minutes to talk. So we're seated 5 minutes I took the farthest most left position, and they put us non-believer, believer, non-believer, believer. You'll have 5 minutes to address this question. It's going to move to the next person, so forth and so on. Yeah. And I'm thinking to myself, I've got a hell of a lot to lose up here, because most of the audience of these 700 students, most of them are believers.
Sure, yeah. You're in Starkville, yeah.
Yes. The evangelists, no matter how things go, they're on a plane on Friday and heading back to Connecticut.
They're used to this.
This is what they do for a living.
Yeah, like you should not definitely do this. I'm just saying.
My student president, no matter how things go, he's gone in a year.
Yeah.
I'm there. And depending on how things go, students could very much, they could very easily not take my class. They could see my name. My name could be mud. Yeah. And not only could they not take my class, their friends could not take my class, et cetera, et cetera. Plus, I've got kids in the school system. If my name becomes mud, that gets broadcast. So I'm highly aware of the optics of the moment. Yeah. And so it all went down. We had 90 minutes of panel discussion, and it went really well.
Yeah, good. Well, that's good.
It went well, and it was. And to your point about of the 4 questions, the second question was the most important to me. Yeah. Second question was what evidence has convinced you or has yet to convince you that there is a God? That was the wording of the question. Now, in preparation for the
that's a weird question.
In preparation for the conversation, I did read the father. The father's got a book called "Give Me an Answer," and it's something he's cobbled together based on his ministry, the questions that he commonly hears as he goes from campus to campus, and the answers he would give. So I skimmed the first 100 pages or so of his book. I've also watched a number of his debates on YouTube.
Before this?
Yes, before this.
You were. Oh, I'm sorry. So you were way more prepared than I
came prepared because
yeah, we're just
I like to do
prepared,
that. Right. Whereas they don't know me from
Do you
Adam.
think they thought it went well?
No, not at all.
Really? Okay.
I don't think they
because a lot of times people they're not even self-aware enough. And
right.
I'm not saying that as a critical of them. I'm just saying people in general, it's hard to be that self-aware that you think you didn't do that well.
Right. Actually, that's a very interesting question because I didn't know these guys. We really didn't interact outside of this 90 minutes when we were on panel. We didn't like chit chat in the green room sort of things. We didn't get to know each other. But no, that's a really good question. I would love to know because the actual video, the panel discussion went up on YouTube. Yeah. It's got like 16,000 views, zillions of comments, and mostly uncharitable toward me. Because the audience.
Yeah, and I know. I saw Bart Ehrman, Jimmy Akin. You know Jimmy Akin? He's like a Catholic apologist, but he wears a cowboy hat during the debates.
Okay.
Not your typical Catholic, but he did really well against Ehrman, and Ehrman actually made a comment toward the end of the debate, I think, sort of like the framework of the debate was not really what he was used to and so on. Like he actually publicly stated some awareness that he didn't do so well in this one.
Right.
Like I think he kind of made that, he didn't say it that way, but I think he was aware.
Yes,
He's a really, really good debater. And he just, it was a slightly different framework to the debate.
Right.
And it was interesting. It was a different kind of framework. And just probably caught him off guard a little bit. Like, which doesn't say anything about whether he's more reliable or not, or his arguments are good. It's just the way the debate was framed that it wasn't to his best advantage, and he wasn't used to it, or something. Who knows?
And I'm not a debater, and I was very much aware that this is what they do. So I intentionally did things that they were not expecting, in the sense that I really used it as a platform to teach critical thinking skills. I did science demonstrations. During my 5 minutes, I did the Freppen objection.
Yeah, it's good.
Which they've never seen that kind of thing before, because I didn't want to be contentious. I didn't want to be viewed as being contentious. I didn't try to rebut anything. I made some notes because I knew I was going to make a breakdown video afterward anyway.
Yeah, okay.
And that's kind of what I wound up doing. Of course, my video doesn't have the same number of views as theirs does, but it gave me a chance to finish some points that I was making. But the second question was the one that I was most prepared for. Mm-hmm. In the sense that they asked, what evidence? And by reading the father's book, I sort of knew the apologetics. And he used his canned responses, and he started talking about the historicity of the scriptures. And he compares the scriptures to being like the LA Times and the New York Times. So they're just as reliable. And so what I did in response to him was I had used in his book I found a passage. It was a passage about. Korean War. It was the River Kwai. It was this POW story that he had recounted in his book, and I read the passage. And as I was reading it in his book, I thought, I'm not sure if this
is real.
Exactly.
It's accurate. Yeah.
It sounds like a sermon starter.
Yeah. Right.
And I thought, I wonder if I could find
the
actual account.
No, I have to say that's pretty brilliant.
And I did.
Yeah, because if you catch something that's inaccurate in his own book, you don't have to offer any argument after that.
Exactly, and that's exactly what I did. Essentially, I caught him. Flat-footed.
I'm guessing he didn't say, "I don't know, I was wrong."
Exactly. I was the Aaron Freppen there. This was an Aaron Freppen.
Of course,
moment.
Freppen wasn't in front of 700 people in a debate either.
Exactly.
That might have been harder.
But it goes. So when you're talking about how would they feel it went? I'm not sure. Because that's the sad thing, is the fact that despite the fact that I was the Aaron Freppen, how would you feel about me as a teacher if after the Aaron Freppen thing, I continued to say every semester, hey, it's atmospheric pressure, atmospheric pressure. I would be a horrible teacher and
100%.
arguably a dishonest human being. And Yet I guarantee.
Well, I mean,
Right,
it
I
would
think
certainly
that-
be disingenuous or something,
Right.
a lack of self-awareness at a
Correct.
level that's not
Right.
healthy.
And essentially, there was another moment in the debate where Cliff talked about Christianity being both verifiable and falsifiable. And he goes into the
Yeah.
spiel about 1
Yep.
Corinthians 15.
Yeah, the people
And-
who've witnessed the resurrection kind of a thing.
And yes, and
Yeah.
Paul tells
Yeah.
us, that if this is not true, or it's
Faith
all,
is in vain.
Right,
Yep.
right. And as I'm hearing it on stage, I'm thinking back. I'm thinking back to my preparation, because June of 2023, Cliff was in a debate with Matt Dillahunty, an online debate, where essentially the same question was asked of him not by Dillahunty and not by the moderator, but by a Q&A at the end of the debate.
Yeah.
The same question comes up about falsifiability of the scriptures, and he launches into the same 1 Corinthians 15. And Dillahunty took him to task in that moment. This is 8 months before he's on stage with me. And the fact that Dillahunty challenged him and he learned nothing from it. And when the same question came around at our panel discussion, he gave the exact same canned answer that is in front of a believing crowd.
Anything to add to it?
Challenging, yeah. And in my breakdown video, I make a prophecy, which is 6 months from now, when he's, and I just shown falsifiability, because Dillahunty's criticism was Cliff doesn't know what falsifiability is. And I had just shown what falsifiability was in my Freppen demonstration, because I was doing it right in front of him, 5 minutes before he launches into Christianity is falsified, which he clearly does not know what falsifiability is. And
Was he saying like it's falsifiable in the sense that if we find a tomb with Jesus' bones or something?
He was just using Paul's words. He was just saying, if
because I always thought that's a kind of obvious one.
If Christ is not true, then this is all for naught. He's just using the words. He's just saying that Paul gives us an out, supposedly, but it doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
I mean, you know what I mean when I say, like you would think if there's say archaeologists find to a high degree of confidence, that Joseph and Mary and Jesus and a couple of the brothers that are mentioned in the Gospels, that they have their bones and the sarcophagus is labeled Yeshua or whatever, his name. And there's some other things that confirm it. It would seem like that. I'm not saying that's like. It would seem like that would be at least a pretty strong falsifiable evidence. Or
yes, right.
So you'd think, why wouldn't you just say something like that?
Right. Yeah. He did not.
He did not. Okay. So, I'm sure that won't surprise you when I say this doesn't surprise me.
Yes.
And I don't know anything about them or anything, so I'm saying nothing about them particularly. I'm just saying, obviously, I've seen this, and I've seen it hardly just in Christianity. It applies all over the place. People believe stuff that's pretty dumb, even when there's really good evidence that it's dumb, right? Human beings.
Yeah.
And also people who are built up what do you want to call it? They're important at what they do.
Right.
They maybe make money off of it. They have a status that these people that have some power, like whatever that is, tend to not be really quick to try and forfeit their greatness publicly.
And I almost wonder, as he was doing this, if we had a private discussion, if I had a street epistemology conversation with him, I'm not convinced that the answers that he offers publicly are the real reasons why he believes. We could have this conversation about the historicity. In his book, he claims it's the historicity that makes me so confident, such and such. But if we were to really talk about it, and if he were even to his satisfaction, realize that maybe not as historically accurate as he would still be a believer, and so that tells me there's another reason. And so that's why
Well,
I would love to sit down and have the question. I would love to ask the question: why is it important to you to believe this to be true? That's because I think that gets to the psychology. I think there's a psychological reason why he believes. There's all these public-facing reasons that he's giving, but I think there's actually. I
think
this
is true of myself.
Reason.
I think this is true of almost everybody. Like I think most of us have a kind of manufactured, ex post facto version of why we did whatever we did in terms of our belief in God. And it's very, very hard to like truly, like I think we're sincere in a lot of ways in what we're doing, although in telling our story, but it's actually really, really hard. And I say this because Drew and I have tried to like drill into each other to help each other see each other's own real deep reasoning and stuff, and it's just so much harder than either of us ever thought it would be.
Yep.
And
this sounds like the conversation that I had with my college roommate, because my college roommate, the priest, we still have conversations.
Right.
And now it's getting tougher and tougher. I think the more content he's reading and watching of mine, I get less and less feedback from him.
Okay.
And actually,
could be that you've widened or something.
Post my discussion panel thing, I've actually reached out to the religious leaders on our campus.
Yeah.
And I'm getting, it's like crickets. I can't get anybody to respond to me. And it's curious. Actually, the guy who organized the thing, the Assembly of God, the Chi Alpha director, he's the only one who we had coffee. We went to the 929. We sat down on Thursday because he has now, because I was after him for a couple of months now. Because this was early March, was when the panel discussion, and I made the video breakdown over spring break. So it's been available, and I sent it to him, and I sent it to the Baptist Student Union people, and I sent it to the Pine Lake Church people. And I've heard nothing, no feedback about my video. But finally, this guy has actually watched my video, and we got a chance to chat about it on Thursday. And I think given the chance, he would not invite the Connectleys back to campus because he doesn't necessarily agree with most of their apologetics.
Interesting, yeah. So, I mean, so people get into ministry, and there's like a lot of value in having drama. They manufacture drama to create interest. And some people are really good at doing that.
Right.
Right? And they seem like they're commanding, and they're a natural leader, and that people follow them, and they start making money off of it, and they create a ministry. And I mean,
and especially being certain, and that's
I'm saying this of them because I don't know them.
Right.
I'm saying that's obviously happening.
Yes.
And there's stuff. There's a good bit of it that's pretty shallow and lacks introspection. Mm-hmm. It's not self-critical. And they're not actually really debating the serious people anyway.
Right.
Often. They confine themselves to very, very localized kind of stuff. I'm not saying this, I just want to be very clear. I'm not trying to say this about them because I know nothing about them other than what you're telling me. I'm just saying I've clearly observed this. But I've also seen this in true of atheist apologists. Some of them are big fish in small ponds, and others get bigger, but really aren't that impressive in the larger intellectual world. They think they're impressive themselves, but they're not really. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, there's like a status or a stake or whatever that people, I don't know, I'm not sure what it is. But it's not surprising, and it's disappointing all at the same time.
Right,
and especially if you're like publishing books and doing this kind of stuff. Jesus purging the temple, I'm always like, if you're a Christian, I'm like, I don't want to be like where he would be able to come and just to wipe out my whole life and just say, most of what you're doing is all just self-interested, right? You're just doing this because you're making money or you're doing whatever. Like I would think this is like one of the first famous stories of Jesus. You're gonna be guilty. You're saying you're a follower of him, and then you're guilty of one of the biggest, most well-known things he did, which is grifting.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So, of course, I think there's a ton of Christians who are not like that.
Yes.
Who would want to have a really serious, interesting discussion, and be able to give better answers and be able to deal with all this in a way that's more reasonable.
Right. And even the Assembly of God guy, he's much,
he's clearly on.
He's much more open to saying, hey, I don't know, and I worry. Well, I don't worry.
Yeah.
He's a young guy.
And he's just in school, you said?
No, he's finished school, but this is, they started the Chi Alpha ministry on our campus like 2 years ago, so it's kind of a fledgling thing. Yeah. His education is actually engineering, and he decided to do this. He tried a couple of years of engineering, really didn't like it, so now he's doing this. So he's a relatively young guy, and I worry that his openness. I like the fact that he's open to saying I don't know, because that means we're going to have useful and genuine conversations. But it seems like it's not going to build him. It's going to be tough for him to build a large ministry because
Yeah.
quite often, I don't know, doesn't
Yeah.
seem to satisfy the folks who are looking for a religious leader.
Yeah.
The Cliff Connectleys of the
Yeah,
world who
yeah,
have
yeah.
a big, at least a TikTok following.
Yeah.
A lot of students knew who. I didn't know who Connectley was either,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
a lot of believing students, he's somehow.
It's like politics.
Right,
The politicians that get popular, you're sort of, a lot of
Yes,
people are like,
exactly.
wait, they're not they
Right.
don't represent me and stuff.
Correct,
But
right.
guess what? They're the ones that get popular.
Yes.
And so, yeah.
Yeah.
And then you have to somewhere decide if you're.
Right. But Cliff is kind of made, and what's kind of sad though, especially being a father, is that, not only, he's made a career of this, but his
Yeah.
children have followed. So the Stewart has followed him into the ministry. His other son Rob has followed him into the ministry. This is now a family business, and I like my kids come around and I play music in the summertime, and they're
Yeah.
part of the business.
Yeah, yeah.
But I'm not forcing them into the business. Whether they get
His
into
may
music
not be
or
either, by the way. Who knows?
But
I've seen
forced
it-
into it.
Yeah, but
Mm-hmm.
like obviously I've seen a lot of sort of these sort of. I mean, listen, there's whole like churches, where like the families pretty much run the whole
Right,
show.
right. That's why the Campolo, I don't know if you know Bart Campolo and Tony Campolo by any chance.
And Tony Campolo, I know only because wasn't he connected to either like Clinton
Yes,
or
right.
Yeah,
After Clinton's thing, I think
Yeah.
Campolo was one of
Yeah,
the
here we
one
are
of
in
the
Little Rock,
advisors,
yeah.
right? So Bart followed his father. Bart is his son.
Okay.
Bart followed him into the ministry.
okay.
Was a preacher himself, but a decade ago, maybe 15 years ago, Bart walked away. Now Bart was more into. He did a lot of inner city church planting
okay.
and community building. He was trying to do that, and then he's a very gifted speaker. So he would give talks, and that's how he fundraised his ministry. But eventually, at age 40 or so, he walked away from it, and this is a pretty big seismic shock in the evangelical world. But eventually, actually, he and Tony produced there's a movie on YouTube called "Leaving My Father's Faith."
Oh, okay.
Where they actually sit down together and have conversations
Yeah.
about Bart's deconversion, how it affected Tony, what Bart's experience was.
Yeah.
So
And Tony's still a Christian.
Tony's still a Christian.
Yeah, so they were
He's now retired from ministry,
Yeah,
and
okay.
it's a wonderful, wonderful documentary. It's a beautiful thing. And the guy who made the movie is now the producer of Bart's podcast. Bart's got a podcast called Humanize Me. So Bart left the ministry, wound up being, he was a secular chaplain at USC for a couple of years. Then he became a secular chaplain at University of Cincinnati, which is where he still currently lives.
Yeah.
Couldn't make a living doing it because there's no money in being a secular chaplain.
Yeah.
But he eventually got a therapy license, and now he does private therapy, does his podcast, and makes a living that way. But I saw Bart at NanoCon 2019, and
What
he did
con?
NanoCon, Nashville Nuns Convention. So it was in Nashville, and it's for nuns, none of the above.
Is that? Yeah, no, I know what it is, but is that an annual thing?
2019 was the first one I went to. Then COVID hit. Then they had it again in 2022. I went to that one as well. They didn't have one in 2023. I'm not sure if they're doing one this year or not.
Just because they have exhibitors like like this?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Right.
I'll have to see if I can get there. Yeah. See if, because Drew lives in Nashville. So
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah.
you can bike across the city and
Right.
attend.
But yeah, so Bart, I actually, because he's the son of a famous evangelist, I sent him a message because we're not buddies, but I have corresponded with him in the past. And so after this Connectly thing, I was like, "Do you happen to know the Connectlys?" And he was like, "Oh my goodness." He's like, "Cliff Connectly came to Brown when I was an undergraduate at Brown. He came to visit campus.
Okay.
And when Bart was a believer.
Yeah.
And he was like, and I was horrified then. And and he watched a little. He
Yeah.
didn't watch my entire video, but
Yeah.
he watched a little. He's like, and I'm still horrified.
I mean, I honestly don't
This
think
confrontational intelligence.
I've ever heard of these people.
Yeah, okay.
So I don't know. I'm not claiming that means anything other than I'm in I know almost all the major Bible churches in Birmingham. I've never
Right.
heard of them. Maybe other people all know them. I have
Right.
I just have no idea. I tend to think people would know maybe of William Lane Craig, or they might know of Plantinga. Certainly, everybody knows of C.S. Lewis.
Right.
Who's not alive, but they would know more. I think they might know. There's a couple of YouTubers now, Ortland or whatever, something Ortland, that they would know of him. Although I hardly know anything about him. So I think.
Yeah. And I'm probably advertising for them more than, I didn't know anything about them until they came to my campus.
So I just don't know enough. But because I'm more of a literary guy, I'm much more on the literature side, like language and how to read narratives. And so I've spent a lot of time just trying to think of what these narratives are about in the Bible. Because so often people say something like, I don't think that's really what the story's about.
Right.
And so that's kind of what I've tend to spend a lot more time on. Like if people are going to say something, like you say, if they're going to say something about science, at least try to get it right.
Right.
And I feel the same about the books. And even though I recognize there's complexities at times, and yes, people could interpret some things a little differently. Generally, it's not like that. Generally, like the first time I ever read the Gospels as an atheist, and I was like 19, it wasn't that hard to get the basic point. Jesus was clearly presented as if he was the Son of God. He talks as if he's the Son of God, yet he's a human, and he is doing stuff that no humans can do, and he's everything he does is to use his power to deliver people from their problems. And he's talking about forgiveness and love your neighbor, and if you reject him, there's judgment. And then he ends up being rejected, and then he gets raised from the dead, and tells the disciples, at least in Matthew and Mark, head on out, and Luke too, head on out into the world and tell people this. And I'm like, it's not like rocket science, if I may say.
Right.
But yet, since then, of course, I've heard much more of people's analysis and so on. So I think probably because my background was in classics, and I read Greek, Hebrew, Latin in the original languages.
You wanted to dive
I could
into
read it in
those,
English.
right,
I was just interested in, maybe more interested in, is it really all this complicated, and there's 100 different interpretations and stuff, and I don't think so much that there is. And for most people, there really isn't if you just put a story in front of them and say, what do you think the point is here? Well, I think the point is Jesus wasn't very happy. And these people, he wasn't happy because they were trying to make money off their religion, and he purged the temple. And kind of seems like an obvious point. So you probably ought to not do that if you were going to follow him.
Right. Of these, like I said, there was 4 discussion prompts, and the second was the one I was most interested in, because it was, what evidence has convinced you or has yet to convince you that there's a God?
Yeah.
The third question was, is faith a reliable method for arriving at true things? Okay. And those were 2 important questions. The first and the fourth were less important.
Just to be clear, is faith a reliable method for arriving at true things?
Yeah.
Gosh, that is a terrible question. Sorry.
I didn't
to
write
me,
it.
that seems like a terrible question.
Yeah. And the first question was...
By the way, maybe I don't know, and I'll learn something, so let's hear it. I know you didn't write it.
The first question was, is the universe a product of happenstance or intelligent design?
Yeah.
And the fourth question was, this one was horribly worded where I couldn't necessarily understand it.
Yeah.
But I think it had to do with, are morals kind of a construction, a human construction, or is there objective morality? It was kind of what the question was driving
That sounds like a better question. Yeah.
And to me, the first and the fourth were relatively unimportant without number 2, because in my mind, that which doesn't exist can't be the cause of other things. So if someone is claiming that God is the cause of the universe, that God's got to exist first. So the question number 1, as far as happenstance or intelligent design, kind of hinges on number 2. And same thing with number 4. If someone's claiming that God is the source of all morality, that also hinges upon the existence of the God.
For it to work,
So I was mostly concerned about 2 and 3. 1 and 4 were less important. Yeah. And that's kind of the way I feel about the Bible.
Seems like a good analysis.
Kind of what I feel about the Bible is that I really don't spend that much time with the Bible, because it's purported to be the reason why it's important to so many people is that it's the Word of God, either directly or through His. But you got to show me that you've got to have a better reason. Just because this book exists, that to me, that doesn't really count as evidence. That's the claim. Yeah. And so it doesn't count as evidence of doing anything to prove the existence. And so you got to get me to the existence before I worry about this book.
So now I can say something to that.
Yep.
Why I think it's sort of of course I think this sort of half true, right? But the reason I don't think it quite works for me is because the first thing is because it's a book of history. It's written at a certain point in history about events that just like reading Plutarch or reading Thucydides, those books could have value in terms of historicity, right?
Yes, right.
So they do give you a vehicle through which you could investigate the truth of these things. You may conclude it's all bunk, but it's at least a vehicle to consider it. We could say, Thucydides is pretty much unreliable on what was going on with the civil war in Greece, in around 400. But it's at least a text that is not like 500 years later that has some connection to the events. We could at least investigate that. That's what you do as a historian. And how valuable that is a separate question, but I'm saying it would have that value. And then the other one was, and this I don't even really know. I'd have to think more how this would work. But like belief in a person comes from that person. Like if you meet your future wife, you talk to her, you get to know her, you feel like she's somebody that's trustworthy. Like I like her, she's appealing to me, and you at some point feel like you can trust her. And that comes out of your direct dealings with her and her words, right? The Bible says faith comes by hearing the word. So in a sense, even if a person's belief about the Bible was not that they were convinced it was inspired, they're still reading about things God did, things God said, right?
Well,
as a character in the story.
Okay, all right.
You see what I'm saying? Like
okay.
They're dealing with there's God who's a character in the story, who created everything. There's God who led the Israelites out of Egypt or whatever, and then God commands things and He says things and all sorts of stuff. Like it's just a character in the story. You either like the character or you don't like the character. You like Anakin Skywalker, you don't like Anakin Skywalker, right? And so people could, like at some level, you have either a like or dislike for the character. And because God for humanity across history, written history, right, is a major question in religion. There's gods all over the place.
Right.
There's the Greek philosophers who criticized all the religions of their day, and yet still made like Aristotle's argument for God, or Plato talks about the ultimate good, capital G, not God, good, but he describes it in ways that is part of the classical theistic tradition or whatever. So I guess I would say if you were going to come to trust God, then that could be a vehicle of trusting God. If God is real, and this account is actually real, of real things He did and real things He said, then that would, there is a connection between the text and trusting the real person. Do you know what I mean? Just like if you got pen letters or something.
I don't know where but I think I don't quite get the leap between the character God and then what you say is the real God.
Well, that's what I was saying. That's the part that I was trying to say. Yeah. I don't know how I'd describe that because God is like in His own category. Because unlike a pen letter or something, where a pen pal or something, where you it's kind of obvious the person that exists over in Italy or something.
J.K. Rowling, creates these characters, and
yes,
we know
absolutely.
The character Dumbledore, but
yeah, I know. What I was trying to add was that the belief in God has been a pretty widespread human phenomenon across history. That's not meant to be non-controversial. That's supposed to be non-controversial.
Yeah, right.
So
this is one of the arguments that Connectly made as well. It's kind of an archaeological argument.
I'm not making this I'm just saying it's just obvious people have been religious. I mean, there's even debate whether there's a religious part of our DNA is religious.
Right.
The religion gene, the God gene, has just been debated. Okay.
Yes, right.
I'm not trying to claim that. Right. I'm saying it's just sort of observational that people.
Sure, we have a pantheon of gods.
There's gods, and a lot of people think the realm of the gods is real, or God is real, depending on their particular tradition.
Right.
There's debate about God and so on. So I'm saying that it's not just like a character in the novel where this is No one's debating the reality of
question,
the guy in the J.K. Rowling.
the question then becomes
his name?
Dumbledore.
No, who's the dude?
Harry Potter.
Yes, thank you. My son-in-law's son-in-law's never going to.
But the question then becomes, what's the most
that.
likely explanation for this? Why?
I'm just saying that I'm really not even trying. I'm not trying to say this is a good reason. I'm saying it's clearly something different there because people are wondering about the reality of God. People do wonder about the reality of God. People actually believe in the reality of God.
Right.
Okay, so the text connecting them to that reality is not so far as the one like Harry Potter. That's what I was trying to say. Because they think of, a lot of people like really actually are convinced that the world is the simplest, best explanation for the world is a creator. So it's not like Harry Potter in that sense. Whether they're right is not my point. My point is for them, that reality is not so far removed from the accounts. Do you know what I'm saying by that?
Yeah.
So you could believe, in other words,
which is why street epistemology becomes so important, is because because the heuristic they're using that rationalizes and justifies that connection can be used then for any for me, ultimately, whether someone believes
just the only point was you were saying the text doesn't seem like it would be that's not a good basis, and I'm saying it does actually. Like, first of all, it happens. People read the Bible and they come to believe in God. Like, it really happens. And then also, I was trying to give some explanation for that it doesn't seem so, like they're so disconnected to me, any more than, and I was trying to say, a person's words are disconnected from you trusting them. Like, there's kind of obviously a way into trusting them. And their character and the things they do are the way into trusting them. So I was trying to say, at some level, that doesn't seem to be.
I think it kind of falls apart. It falls apart.
Okay, so where does it fall apart?
Well, because with someone again doing the trust thing, there's an element of falsifiability with someone. So there's something concrete that they could do to make me not trust them.
Okay.
Whereas you're making this connection. Someone who believes that this book is the Word of God, what could they learn or find out?
I'm talking about people who don't believe yet. I'm saying that if someone. We were talking about how they come to believe, not whether they still believe him. How they come to believe. You could read the book and say, I don't like this God at all, and I'll trust him, not believe in him, right?
I don't know how.
Like there's a difference between coming to trust somebody who you've never believed in, right? Like if you didn't know when you meet a person, you don't trust them right away. You grow to trust them. You come to believe in them, say, in their character or whatever. And I'm not even, you understand, I'm not trying to make an argument for God or anything like that.
Okay.
I'm trying to make the point that I don't think I think it does make sense that the accounts about God's deeds and his words would be connected to people's coming to trust him. That's what I was trying to say. But and yes, it could be in continuing to trust him as well,
I'm just wondering if there's better evidence.
I'm much more interested in there could be very better. Like common sense tells me, if you actually watch Jesus come out of the tomb, seems like that would be better evidence than reading it in a book.
Yes, I agree.
So that's obvious. That seems like that would be better evidence.
And that seems that would be a much better system. If it's really important for people to believe in you, and if this is so important to people's eternal destination, I would think that a God that was interested in his own creation, believing in him and being with him for all eternity, I would think there would be a better system. And in the absence of that that
seems pretty reasonable to me. I mean, obviously, I've thought about it, and I do think that a lot of people still believe in God, even though they've not seen, meaning God who are Muslim, Jewish, some parts of Hinduism, stuff like that. Even people who sort of believe there is, like I interviewed a guy
so I'm interested in, so what's the explanation for that? Why would someone, because we make most of our decisions based on evidence, and we crave evidence. And why does our brain give us the excuse or give us the option? We kind of wall off a part, or
You think people are really walling it off? I don't think they're walling. I think they really think. I think people sincerely think I think they feel like the world is giving evidence for God. The old way a house gives evidence of an architecture, or the David gives evidence of Michelangelo. I think that's what they would be experiencing. You know what I mean?
I think that they're less likely. So I give the example in my astronomy class. I talk about horoscope signs.
Yeah.
Because I lived for decades of my life thinking that I was a Libra. My birthday's September 27th.
Yeah.
Why did I think I was a Libra? Because
someone told you. Yeah.
I go to the newspaper. I find my birthday, Libra. Such and such and such.
Yeah.
Never had any reason to question it until I started teaching astronomy. Start learning, well, where does this actually come from? What do these things mean? And it turns out that your horoscope sign is the location of the sun amongst the background stars on the day of your birth.
Yeah.
Well, this is a problem because the sun is in Virgo on my birthday. I'm not a Libra, and whatever your horoscope sign is probably wrong.
I hope it is. I'm Aquarius.
You're Aquarius? I would have to look it up. I've got a whole list of but
actually, there could be worse.
But so the reason being, 3,000 years ago, when the Babylonians first started tracking the stuff and kind of tried to lay out their little model of how the universe works, the sun was in Libra in late September. But they didn't know. They may have known the Earth was round. Yeah. They may have known we were spinning. They didn't know that the Earth wobbles once every 26,000 years. And so now 3,000 years later, we've gone about 1/9 of the way around our overall wobble. And that has precessed the equinoxes, is what it's called, precession of the equinoxes. So therefore, the sun, which was in Libra 3,000 years ago, 3,000 years later is now in Virgo. So my entire life, I've been a Virgo, but yet those Babylonians, they set these dates in stone, and the newspapers have picked up on it. It's never gotten changed. And
but I'm not sure what it's illustrating.
So I tell my students, I was like, how do you feel now? Apart from that poor student who's got Scorpio tattooed on their arm and is less likely to change their mind, they're pretty cool with that. They've taken in some new information. They were probably pretty confident that, hey, I'm a Sagittarius.
Sure.
But now all of a sudden, they're presented with new information, and their confidence in being a Sagittarius has decreased.
Right.
And they think, oh, okay, I'm a Capricorn because I've been presented. Yeah, that's the way we operate with most things. We hold a belief, but that belief is kind of it can be moved, especially when presented with good information.
For sure, yeah.
But when it comes to religious beliefs, these are the ones that are kind of walled off.
But you and I are both examples that they weren't walled off.
Yes, exactly. Right. Yes,
but we went in opposite direction. And both of us understand that. Like the way we feel when we look back on it is we got new information, new evidence that turned us in like opposite directions from each other, but opposite direction from where we were. So it would be, in that case, we're examples where it's not walled off. Even though I agree with you, like it does seem like for a lot of people it seems mostly walled off. I don't know if it's totally, I have no idea.
Yeah, and that's why these conversations are important. That's why, because I wouldn't be a street epistemologist if I thought it's a permanent wall.
Yeah.
It's just it's a wall that's a little tougher to access. It's a breakdown.
Which kind of is understandable because it's so, like
so
the existential angst.
Correct.
I mean, look at just with your mom.
Right.
I mean, and you still to this day, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And your sibling has, your brother has still connection with your mom? Right?
Yes, my brother has, in fact, we recently had a conversation about all this because he was far less invested as a kid. Like he was an altar boy for a couple of years.
Yeah, okay.
He just went through the motions. He wasn't nearly as in as I was.
Right.
So then but he married, I think he may have married in the church. Certainly his wife is Catholic.
Okay.
So that made a huge difference. And now, so his children are going through, they're going through the motions. They did, so they're walking they're towing the line.
Yeah.
And I did not. So,
So you have
a recent conversation with him, he definitely, it actually kind of grinds his gears that he's giving money to the Catholic Church. That bothers him because he does not like the Catholic Church. But his wife, he does have a feel that there's a higher power. That's pretty much all I could get out of him. He feels like there's a higher power, and that's about all. He doesn't think about it very much. It's a minimal part of his life.
Yeah. I think this is probably most people, by the way. Even the people who believe in, like they would have said God. Now they say higher power. They could say other things too.
Right.
depending on their background, where they live in the world, and their language and stuff like that.
Right, right.
Just the idea, I guess, that
Yes,
they.
yeah. And my sister-in-law is Filipina. She's very
Yeah.
like it's culturally it was super important for her,
Yeah.
to have she's the religious figure in that household.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we could just go on, and we are going to go on, right? We're going to meet up in Starkville, and Drew's going to be with me.
Yes, oh, that'd
and,
be great.
And we'll
That'd be
do
great.
a panel for 20 students that you invite. You control the
write the
questions,
questions.
because I mean this because I feel like in our discussion, I could trust that you would
Right.
just try and create interesting questions and stuff.
Yes,
you know,
yeah.
and it's amazing. Like if you really think of it, just. And I say this because I know there'll be some Christians who listen to this, our conversation here. And I think as a Christian, just think like the very fact that you kind of got hoodwinked into, like they didn't tell you that they were going to create like a debate thing.
Oh, right.
And they didn't
Yeah.
tell you the questions until when was it?
Well, I got the questions like maybe the night before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like this is not the way to create integrity,
Right,
charity.
right.
I mean, what about charity? Just being charitable to the person to say, we want you to feel comfortable with the way in which the conversation is structured and
Right.
what we're going to
And
do.
actually, I will say,
Right? Doesn't that make a big difference?
Because going into it, we sat down, and one thing I did tell Cliff, I told the father, because again, I sort of knew they took a confrontational approach, and I said, hey, I'm not here to debate, because that wasn't the way it was presented to me. I'm not here for a debate, and I'm not going to be preached to. I said, if you do either of those things, I'm walking off the stage.
Yeah, right.
Because I've got better things to do. I should be playing Scrabble with my children. This is normally when we play Scrabble every evening.
Right.
So I'm taking time out of my family time to
Yep.
be here to do this. And that took him aback, I think. And that was part of my overall strategy, was to throw him off. He wasn't used to, I was kind of confrontational in that moment before the mics were on.
Right.
I was kind of setting some ground rules.
You were going to Peter Hitchens him? Did you see the
so.
famous Peter Hitchens? He left a
Did he?
podcast. He walked out of a podcast a month ago with Alex O'Connor.
I would have, and actually, Cliff did wind up getting up and preaching, because after the River Kwai stuff, he was shaking. Like I got cut on. Like my 5 minutes ended, and I was about to deliver the finishing blow. He was up against the ropes, and I think he knew it, because the crowd. There's one kid after the River Kwai stuff. He was like, "Hey, can that go on?" Because I had Cliff on the ropes with his own material. And so now all of a sudden he goes into panic mode. He gets up and he starts preaching. We were supposed to be behind this table. And he starts going into preacher mode and going back and forth. And his son did the same thing, because I think they started to notice, there's a change in the room, even in a room full of mostly believers. So I felt like after it was all said and
It's just a good lesson for Christians that if you're going to have conversations, they need to be authentic and charitable.
Right,
and by the
right,
way, that's true
right.
with atheists. I've had some pretty uncharitable conversations with atheists too.
In my breakdown discussion, I try to charitably. One of the examples during the panel discussion, the son, he said that there's the way he described it. He felt like Christians were under attack. He said there's a militancy, is the way he described it.
Yeah.
A militancy against faith, particularly Christianity.
Yeah.
And he used, and his example, evidence of this was the Harvard entrance exam.
Yep.
He said the first question on the Harvard entrance exam is, ask students, how do you differ from your parents when it comes to religion?
Yeah.
Everyone's kind of cool.
That was it. Yeah.
I'm writing a little note to myself, because this sounds like BS to me. This is my BS detector is going off, but I'm not going to rebut it in the moment. I'm not going to say, where'd that come from? But sure enough, I had spring break this happened right before spring break. We finished the panel discussion, and I'm thinking about what's going to be my rebuttal video.
Yeah.
I call Harvard's admissions office. Do you guys have an entrance exam?
Yeah.
Person up there's like, entrance exam? We haven't had an entrance exam in modern history.
Yeah.
And so I could have left it there, but I was like, let me be charitable. Like, Stuart clearly is either making this up from whole cloth, or he's heard it from somebody else, and this just serves his agenda. His bias is that Christians are persecuted.
Yeah.
And so he's heard this story about this Harvard entrance, and he's now use that piece of evidence
Yeah.
to further confirm something he already believes to be true. And it's
Yeah.
going down very smoothly with the audience because they think that Harvard is this liberal indoctrination factory, and so this further confirms something they believe
Well,
to be true.
I have to say, I went to Columbia. It was definitely not conservative, I'll say that.
But so I try to be charitable. Even in my
Yeah.
video, I say, okay, they don't have an entrance exam, fine. They do have essay prompts. So if you apply to Harvard, you have to you have to write an essay,
Yeah.
and they have certain prompts. And the third prompt is, have you ever changed your? Essentially, have you ever challenged a belief or something you thought to be true? How did you feel? That sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And
It's a generic question, yeah.
exactly,
Good question,
and actually,
yeah.
it's a question that I asked.
a good question, yeah.
I asked that question in.
But he had turned it around
Correct.
to be. And
Yes.
by the way, that's another example for Christians who are
Right.
listening, of you have to love the truth. That's what you claim.
Exactly.
So
yes.
if you don't, and everybody gets some things wrong.
Right.
But if you have a pattern of getting things wrong,
Right.
or you're not quick to admit, that
Right.
All right, I got to close out, but it's great to great to converse with you, and hope people enjoyed our lengthy conversation.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it.